On today's episode of the Wandering Buffalo podcast, Justin and I are going to talk about the draft implications, since, it is just right around the corner, and about how the Bills in New York State, Erie County, have reached a final stadium deal.
You're now listening to the Wandering Buffalo podcast with your hosts, Andrew Chang and Justin Godwin.
Welcome in, everybody, and thanks for joining us on another episode of the Wandering Buffalo podcast, a show here on the Buffalo FamBase network. He's Jay Gods 22, and I'm Two Changs. You can find us on most social media and podcasting platforms, in the show, of course, on YouTube by searching up the Wandering Buffalo podcast. Justin, how are you doing?
I'm good today. I'm getting a little antsy. We got a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks until draft day. You've known me for quite some time. You know how I am about draft day. It's my Christmas, so pins and needles, getting excited for that. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's just things have slowed down. The news has slowed down. So I definitely want to preface this episode by saying, it's the 5th of April, so who knows what's going to happen between now and when this podcast drops. So if something does happen, full disclosure, it's the 5th of April. We just don't know about it at the time of recording. So if something pops up, I'm sure we'll try to pop something out for you, as we always do. But news has kind of come to a slow halt. But let's start with just talking about the draft in general. We'll flush our thoughts out, where we think the Bills should take their first round pick, and we won't really take it too much farther beyond that, just because we're not draft experts. Okay, we have to make that so abundantly clear sometimes, right? People, and one thing you need to understand is that mock drafts are like thought exercises. We're trying to be predictive, but at the same time, it's a prediction. It's kind of like you're trying to guess the NCAA bracket. Go UConn, by the way, congrats. You don't really know what's going to happen, but you can try to imagine what's going to happen here. Does that make sense, Justin?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. For me, they're a lot of fun to do and play with different scenarios, and if I mortgage 3 years of picks, what can I do? They're fun to play around with. They're also grossly unrealistic. Some of the best draft people I follow, if they get 30 to 40% of the picks right in the first round, that's a big win. So all this prediction and prognostication we want to try to do, we're also drafting at the tail end of the first round.
Which is a good problem, by the way.
Yeah, there's so many crazy scenarios that can play out before we're picking. We're not even on draft day trades yet. All that. So it's just a fun exercise to play with, and just start looking at some names of people and start thinking about, what they might look like with the team and how much fun it would be.
Right. And the hardest part about mock drafts is that you're trying to be predictive about fit. Yeah, you can do all these mock drafts, and then there's names, and you're just trying to be all right, position. And that's where I really want to start off with this conversation with you, is that what positions right now, Justin, are you for sure 100% confident that the Bills are not taking at number 27? That make absolutely no sense. And I'm not talking about trades up or trades down. Just right now, stand pat. We're at 27. What positions are we for sure not taking?
So there's not a ton that I would rule out at 27. And it's largely due to the way Bean likes to construct his roster in the offseason. I'm getting there. A lot to do with how Bean builds his roster. So Bean likes to go into the draft and fill his holes. So there's not a ton of glaring needs. Positions that I don't anticipate seeing. I wouldn't anticipate seeing quarterback. Easy one off the board.
Copycat.
I wouldn't anticipate seeing like any sort of weak side linebacker. I think you have that covered with Milano. I think Terrell Bernard, as much as they say he could be competing for the Mike spot, I think he's more of a Milano backup. Beyond that, I mean, I'll throw running back into the mix, but there's just a ton of mock drafts out there that have Bijan going to the Bills at 27.
Now let's take a minute there to really flush out that thought. So Bijan Robinson is like Breece Hall situation 2.0, right? Everyone was like, "Hey, the Bills are in love with Breece Hall. They're going to take him." And then what happened? They didn't end up taking him. The year before that, I believe, was Travis Etienne, right? Mm-hmm. And everyone's saying the Bills are in love with Travis Etienne, and the Bills didn't end up taking him. Now, granted, I believe Breece Hall came off the board after the Bills picked, but Travis Etienne came off the board before they picked in their respective drafts. But it's very interesting to me that running back has been linked to the Bills so much, considering that the makeup of this running back room is pretty diverse, and especially with the addition of Damian Harris. I really, really like that pickup. I just can't imagine them tossing another running back into the mix, but Bijan Robinson apparently is that guy. He's like Saquon-esque. Do you really just kind of like throw a wrench into that, situation, trying to figure out what you do with the running backs? Is that worth it, or is there a need, in your opinion, that really just makes it like painfully obvious that you just have to pass on a talent like Bijan Robinson because the hole on your team at this specific position is that important?
So I have a couple different ideas on this, and I'll start by saying, like, adding Damian Harris, reworking Nyheim Hines' deal, like all the stuff we did to the running back room this year, and even drafting Cook in the second round last year. I think if there's a talent on the board such as Bijan Robinson, who's being touted as, I've heard him compared to the best running back prospect since Adrian Peterson. I think the moves that you've made this offseason, if you had any concern about the running back room, I don't think it would preclude the Bills from, having to make a subsequent move to carry on from that. Most importantly, if we're talking about a guy that's getting touted as, this like generational type player, I don't think there's a chance that he sniffs 27. So I'm not really all that concerned about it being a possibility of him getting there.
But with this thought exercise, let's pretend that he is there.
But with this thought exercise, we have a general manager in Brandon Beane who did draft Christian McCaffrey. And when Beane talks about Christian McCaffrey now, he described that draft pick of McCaffrey as a sleep good at night pick. So, all that to say, if Bijan Robinson is on the board at 27, I would 100% be convinced that Beane would make that move. And honestly, I'm not here for drafting a running back in the first round. I like the room that we have, but if that move were to happen, you know how you start, watching more and more of the players that the Bills pick up. Yeah, I'm gonna have a hard time not being really psyched about that pick if it does end up happening after I get rid of my initial feelings.
Right. Okay. So, Bijan Robinson's on the board, and now we're talking about a situation. I'm gonna throw another wrench into this hypothetical world. let's say wide receiver Jackson Smith and Jigma. Is that how you pronounce his name? I'm so sorry if I mispronounced it. Njigba. Let's say he's there in addition to Bijan Robinson. What are you doing? Is the prospect so good and is the best overall player probably in the draft at that point, Bijan Robinson, still overpowering the need and the talent, which ultimately isn't as quote-unquote star-like as compared to a Bijan Robinson, but it's still pretty damn good. Does that outweigh getting a Jackson Smith and Jigba? Are you still picking Bijan Robinson because of who he is and what he could be, as opposed to getting a wide receiver that won't probably be, he'd probably be really good, but he's not touted as generational talent at the position like a Bijan Robinson is to running back.
So for this exercise, are we putting this in a vacuum? Like there's no right, like we're not talking any other positions, just those two players.
Just these two are on the board.
Okay, so for me, I would be taking the wide receiver position here. I don't want to keep butchering names.
Yeah, you want. We're so good at that.
So for me,
you want to be predictive. And I'll tell you one thing: we're real good at that.
Yeah, we'll mess those
year
up.
after year.
For me, the wide receiver position, all the things we said, Bijan could be great, but I do like the running back room that we have put together right now. Mm-hmm. And if I'm looking at the method of building this team right now, like we have an absolute stud in Stefon Diggs. He's getting a little bit older. We do have to, at some point,
address it.
Cross the bridge of thinking about life after Diggs. We have Gabe Davis. I think he gets a little bit more criticism than he deserves. I do think some of the criticism is deserved. But we're in a situation where if he does take the step up that everybody wants, he might price himself out of Buffalo with the cap situations we have.
Yeah, then what do you do?
So you're either talking about, giving him something like $15 million a year, or you have to move
15,
on.
16, 17, yeah.
Whether he's good or bad, you might have to move on from him. And then we have made some moves this offseason. Deontay Hardy, Trent Sherfield. You have bodies in the room. But for me, looking at the free agent market of receivers, the way it keeps going up, and these top name receivers getting $20 million, you have to take that receiver in the first round. You get the cost control for the 4 years. You get the 5th year option, and you're talking 5-6 years down the line until you actually have to give this guy the second contract. And I think there's just significantly more value there than the running back position.
Okay, because I'm such a bad mechanic, I've thrown another wrench into the situation.
So many wrenches.
I know. And linebacker is the number one linebacker is on the board. And I don't know why I'm just blanking so hard on his name right now, from Iowa.
Jack Campbell.
Jack Campbell, thank you. He's on the board. So best linebacker in the draft, best fit for the Bills, in my personal opinion, at linebacker for the draft, and by far probably top need, which is debatable amongst some people, but I think it's the biggest need on this team. He's there. What are you doing now? You have all three of those players there. What do you do? Because now, we're in different buckets, right? The need with Bijan Robinson is super low. Wide receiver, it's medium. Linebacker, it's super high. But the prospect talent drops off every single you know what I'm saying? It's like an X on a graph. What are we doing? What are you doing right there?
Yeah, so with this situation, I mean, I'm going to agree. I think the most glaring hole, and I'd be hard-pressed to have somebody convince me otherwise, is the middle linebacker position. For me, if we're putting it in, so really we're doing the bucket of Jackson Smith and Jigba and Jack Campbell now. If I have the opportunity,
Bijan Robinson is just off the board for you.
I already took Jackson Smith and Jigba over Bijan, so he's out.
Yeah, okay. If you were going to follow that line of thinking, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. I have to narrow this down for myself, or I'm going to talk myself back out of my last decision. So if I have these two sitting there, for me personally, like I said, that middle linebacker is the biggest hole. But I also am looking at this a couple different ways. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba has the potential to get to be that superstar wide receiver in a couple of years. Mm-hmm. For me, I've been saying this for a while. It's even more so with Sean McDermott taking over the defense, doing the defensive play calling. There's been so much investment on the defensive side of the ball. When you're looking at, defensive ends in the first round, second round, going back, cornerbacks, linebackers, there's been so much draft capital that's gone to the defense. And yet we've had this great top 5 defense. Sean McDermott's taking over the controls, and he's made his bread and butter being a defensive mastermind. For me, in that situation, I'm letting him play a little left-handed, and he doesn't have the superstar linebacker that he's hoping for. I'm supporting my quarterback. I'm supporting the offense. And when we look at a game like, 2 years ago against the Chiefs, even this last year against the Bengals, the shootout with the Chiefs stands out to me more because we had Tremaine, we had a top 5 defense, and there's only so much you were doing to slow down the Chiefs anyways. So give me one more weapon to let my offense score one more touchdown. Support Josh. Getting some extra help.
Interesting. It sounds like you're more in the camp of that equilibrium. So on the last episode, I really mentioned like that marriage of need and value. And you don't want to overreach on the need, and you definitely don't want to overreach on the value part. So,
correct.
So, it makes a lot of sense. And, on the next half of this episode, I'm going to probe Justin's mind about what else could possibly go on with this draft and what positions, maybe a sneaky position that us fans should look out for. But before we get to that, we got to take a quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Dick DeGroat, Bill's dad. Now back to the show.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Wander Buffalo podcast. He's Jay Gods. I'm Two Changs. Thanks for sticking around. Let's wrap up this episode, Justin, by talking about maybe a sneaky position that us Bills fans aren't necessarily aware of that could be the first round target for the Buffalo Bills. Now, we already talked about running back, linebacker, and wide receiver. And I think all those picks could potentially happen. And I mentioned on the last episode that maybe the defensive line could be an investment as well, considering that we don't have a defensive tackle signed after next year. And, after next year, the defensive end room besides Von Miller and who else? Boogie and why am I blanking? Groot. That's pretty much it. So those are big needs trying to be like, if you're trying to look down the road. But I'm going to challenge you. What position that I didn't mention just now, again, defensive line, linebacker, wide receiver, and running back, do you think could be a really sneaky pick? And if the Bills do end up going with that position, how pissed off are you going to be as a fan?
So I'll start with my reaction. I wouldn't be pissed off at this, but it wouldn't be the most fun round 1 pick.
Okay, let me change that second part. How pissed off is the fan base?
I think this would be like a 50-50 one.
Also, like the Josh Allen pick.
Yeah, like most picks, we get very emotional in one direction or the other. There's no there's no in between. My sneaky pick in the first round would be right tackle, and I think this would be, I guess,
Pandora's box.
Yeah, I guess this would just be tackle pick. We don't have to say right tackle.
No, it would be right tackle.
Right. So I think there's a ton of reasons that this makes sense. There's a believer in me of Spencer Brown. I think it would kind of fall into that sneaky surprise bucket, because all of the message coming out of One Bills Drive is very supportive, very hopeful for Spencer Brown, right? There's really no denying that he's struggled. He's had his ups and downs. But to me, this is very similar to the Dawson Knox situation, or as, COVID year in there, didn't have a college season, missed a training camp last year because of a back surgery. So this would be like the big year 3 jump year, regular offseason, kind of no excuses. Now I'm very cautious with that, because it starts to feel like, we're anticipating that third year jump from all these, freak athletes that
year three.
Yeah, they're betting on traits. And it almost starts to feel like, to me, like every year this time of year we see the draft cycle, and this year it's I'm gonna say Will Levis, kind of Anthony Richardson, of just these really raw, toolsy quarterbacks that they're like, oh, this could be the next Josh Allen, and we keep hearing that, right?
And Josh Allen was supposedly going to be the next Carson Wentz.
Correct. And
or Cam Newton.
I think it's so hard to make the one-for-one comparisons, and I do see a path where Spencer Brown could take a big leap this year, and if he can put together all those tools he has and solidify that game, he could be a starting caliber to very good right tackle. For me, the most important thing to keep this team moving forward is keeping Josh Allen upright, keeping him clean, helping in the run game to kind of give that balance. And to me, if you're taking a tackle at 27 to compete with him, the worst case scenario here is Spencer Brown keeps the job, and that means that he's playing better. Or this guy takes over, you have a high-level swing tackle, you have maybe some trade bait. To me, it would be not a super fun pick. The draft is really fun when you're drafting the sexy positions. But the Bills also haven't made a ton of investments as far as like high draft capital on the offensive line. So I couldn't be too mad about it.
We took Cody Ford a while back. He's a tackle, right?
Tackle, guard.
Yeah, tackle, guard, right, left, center, something. All right, you're gone.
You're gone.
Yep. Yeah, so if the Bills ended up taking a right tackle, I don't know how I'd feel about it. Ask me about it after who it is, know? Right. And it, like I prefaced at the beginning of this episode, it's hard to be predictive, and how many draft picks has Brandon Beane made where I've been like, I don't really understand that. And I also don't understand a lot of the 31 other GM's picks at the time. I'm like, I don't really get that. Well, that's because we're not a general manager of an NFL franchise. So as much as this is played out, this saying is just trust the process. Trust the process. Because that's all you can do. You can be angry with it, but at the end of the day, it happened. So you might as well just roll with it and just keep living.
What's funny about you saying that? I know this was probably like 30, 40 episodes ago or something. You were kind of teasing that mantra about like how it's just like this blind faith, and I found, when I really think about it, that I only ever say trust the process when it's a move that like I completely don't agree with, or like I don't see the logic of. I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to trust the process on this.
You know that meme that has the guy crying, but on the other side he's like wearing a mask, and on the other side of the mask it's smiling, but behind the mask it's a guy that's crying.
Yeah,
like that. Trust the process.
Yeah,
that would be me if if they took a position that I have, like, I don't know, like if they took like a punter or something, which would never fucking happen, right? But I would be like, oh my god, trust the process.
First round running back that's not Bijan. I trust the process.
Yeah, I think it would sound like I'm constipated. Just like it would be something.
This week on the Wandering Buffalo podcast, we trust the process.
Yeah. Just like we did so many times before like this regime came in. And we poke fun at the trust the process thing, but this regime has done nothing but prove to us that we should give them a little bit of leeway. So I'm willing to, trust the process. I really don't know how else to say it besides that. So it is what it is. All right, let's wrap up this episode by talking about how the Bills, New York State, Erie County reached final stadium deal. And I'm paraphrasing this from an article from Buffalo Rumblings because, they just do great work. Specifically, I believe John Boccacino did this one. And I'll just kind of read it word for word, but paraphrase it. But it's been over a year, and a deal was reached by the Bills, Erie County, and the state. The full agreement, which is basically it's like a 30-year lease to keep the Bills in Orchard Park, which is sweet, was released to the public, and everything was filed with Erie County on Tuesday. So now Erie County has about 30 days to review everything and whether or not to sign off on the $1.54 million project. The last steps of the stadium, that's pretty much it before we start making this happen. So big news in terms of development. Renderings were made, and it's just wild that this is actually going to happen, and the Bills will have a new updated stadium. And a coworker of mine, and I'm just going to put the side story in real quick, is that I noticed that, or what he said, he went to California, and he said I went to SoFi Stadium, and I was like, oh my god, it's so beautiful. And he is British, so I'm trying to give him my British accent. He's like, it's so
Spot
beautiful.
on.
Like Jesus, it just looks so good, and the canopy, and I don't even know why I made this a simile, but I was just like, yeah, it's kind of like the stadium's kind of like a toilet, and then the canopy's kind of like the lid to the toilet. And we paused, and he just laughed. He was like, yeah, if you think about it like that, it's just one big like John, like. And he's like, why don't the Bills have a canopy? Why aren't they doing anything like that? And I just kind of gave him the quick answer of home field advantage. It's home field advantage. You want them to play. You want them to say, crap, we got to go to Buffalo to play. Not we got to go to Buffalo to play. This is going to be nice, we relax and chill. No, this is Western New York football. It snows. The weather sucks. Deal with it. Get snowballs pegged at you.
We have to deal with it. You have to deal with it.
Yeah, pretty much. But, Justin, how you feel about this? I just kind of sieved out my thoughts. Sorry, I was going to give you that opportunity, but I just went on my British accent kind of thing. And if you happen to see this coworker, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Listen, man, give up your day job and start just doing impressions, because that was spot on.
Thank you.
I honestly, I don't have tons of thoughts on the stadium. My main thought is this is another great step. I need to see the final pen go to paper in the breaking ground. We've had too many of those last minute Bills heartbreaks in our lifetime. I don't need this to be one of them. I don't think it's going to go that way, but I'm ready to, get to that point. And then my only other prevailing thought on the stadium is, I've seen the renderings. Mm-hmm. I see people like, oh, it's so ugly. It should have a dome. It should have that, blah, 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 blah. I personally don't care about any of that. The main thing of what you said, pretty much the only thing that I take from this is a 30-year lease, which would keep the Buffalo Bills in Western New York through
it's like
2055.
30 years of fixed mortgage.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you could plate the whole thing in reflective glass, mirrors. I don't personally care what the stadium looks like. I want to see the Bills on the field in Buffalo. I think it's great for the Buffalo community. I think if you ever took the Bills out of Buffalo, it would be a detriment to the NFL.
Oh my God!
It's such a passionate fan base.
Western New York,
yeah, all that. So you could build the exact same stadium we have, but make it all structurally sound, and I would be satisfied with that. If you told me that we had another 30 years, I don't need a shopping mall and pools and all that extra stuff.
Yeah, I don't need Jerry World. I need shorter lines to the bathroom and to beer and food, and that's pretty much it.
Maybe we bring back troughs. I like the troughs.
Yeah, that awkward side eye conversation you have with that person to your left and or right, because you could have both. They could all be having a conversation, and next thing you know, you catch someone's eyes drifting low, and you're like, "What's up, dude?"
Listen, the trough was efficient and got the job done for me.
Yeah.
They'll never come back.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Lawless
Last time I saw a
times.
trough was actually Mr. Goodbar on Elmwood, and I was just like, oh, this is kind of cool.
Then somebody walked up next to you.
Yeah, and there was the whole trough, and just why did you pick the one right next to me? It's like,
yep,
for real, dude. I mean, I would get it, I guess, if it was urinal split up and there was a kiddie urinal and the kid walked all the way to the kid one, but you're not a kid. You're a grown-ass man.
Use the space provided.
Yeah, read the room, man. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. He's Jay Gods. I'm Two Changs. You can find this episode and many more episodes on the Buffalo FamBase Network. We're always pushing out great content. Jacob, our executive producer, just dropped our website. So if you haven't done so, please check that out. We got some good stuff coming there, some good merch, obviously. Justin, you want to say anything to the fans before we take off?
Yeah, that's about it. Check out the website. Jake in particular has been working really hard on this. TheWanderingBuff.com. There's merch available. There's some articles that we've written up. There's going to be more coming to it. It's going to keep growing, but this is the first look at it. We just dropped it about a day and a half, 2 days ago. So
right.
If you made it this far in the episode, check out the website. We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, and like I said, we have other content creators over at the Buffalo FamBase Network, so definitely check them out. I love all those guys over there. So please do that. Like, comment, subscribe, review our podcast, and the network, of course. Obviously, that would be huge as well. Thank you for listening, and as always, go Bills.